Please see the link in the description to download a worksheet for this video. If you've not already watched the video on the rounding rainbow, then we suggest that you watch that before viewing this video. When ranking something, we want everything to fit perfectly, so we measure distances very accurately. That applies to small wooden projects, and it applies to big projects like planning where a new building will go. In both of these cases, we want to know the value of each digit in each place value. But there are other times when we don't need to know an exact number. We just want a rough idea of how big a number is. For example, the distance between New York and Los Angeles is 2,361 miles, but we often say it's about 2,000 miles. 2,000 miles is a much simpler number to say because many of the place values are zeros. When we simplify a number by turning some of its digits to zero, we call this rounding. We use rounding when we just want a rough idea of a number. For example, these signs show how many people live in 3 Minnesota towns. We can simplify these numbers by rounding them. We would say there are about 7,000 people who live in Del Plain, about 7,000 people who live in Jordan, and about 46,000 people who live in Shakopee. In this video, we'll learn how to round numbers that do not have a decimal point, what trailing zeros are, and how to round numbers that have a decimal point. We'll start by learning how to round numbers that do not have a decimal point. The water is deep in this area of the sea. The passengers ask the captain about how deep it is. Her depth finder tells her it's 698 feet deep in this area. That's too much detail for the passengers, so she wants to round it to the nearest hundreds place. What is 698 rounded to the nearest hundreds? For problems about place values, we recommend that you first draw the rounding rainbow. Let's start by writing the decimal point and drawing a dashed line. We'll write in the ones place above the dashed line. Then, we'll draw 5 dashed lines on the left and 5 on the right. Each dashed line will be a place value. Then, we draw in the arches that connect the matching place values on each side. Now, we write the name of the place values for each arch. And finally, we write a reminder that those on the right side of the decimal have a suffix that says THS. We call this the rounding rainbow. Here's the original number we want to round. First, we circle the place value we want to round. In this case, we're going to round the hundreds place value. It's important to use a circle, as we'll explain shortly. One way to remember to use a circle is because a circle is round, and we're rounding a place's value. Then we write the rhyme that tells us how to round. It says, look next door, if it's more than 4, then add 1 more. We'll draw a rectangle, which is the shape of a door. This is next to the digit we want to round. In this case, the next door digit is a 9. 9 is greater than 4, so we'll add 1 to the digit we're rounding. That means the hundreds digit changes from a 6 to a 7. Here's what the rounded number looks like. Please note that all the digits to the right of the rounded digit become 0. So the rounded number is 700 feet. When there are enough digits to the right of the decimal point, we usually simplify the number further by writing it without a decimal point. The sea is about 700 feet deep at this location. Next, we'll talk about what trailing zeros are. Here are 2 teddy bears. The price for the one on the right is $12.50. The one on the left has a price tag that says 12.00. What price is this? We do not say $12.00. Instead, we say $12. With the cents are 0, we can say the amount. If we want, we can even leave off the decimal point and the zeros. That's because $12.00 is equal to $12. We call these zeros trailing zeros. They're zeros that are on the far right side of the decimal point, and with no other non-zero digits to their right. We can write these zeros if we want, but most of the time we choose not to write them or to say them. Next, we'll talk about how to round numbers that have a decimal point. This lady wants to know how far it is from the shore. Her husband just looked at his GPS, and it says they are 4 and 8,375 10,000ths miles from shore. That's too much detail for a casual conversation, so he wants to round it to the nearest tenth of a mile. What is this rounded to the nearest tenth of a mile? Here's the original number we want to round. First, we circle the place value we want to round. In this case, we're going to round the tenths place value. It's important to use a circle. Then we write the rhyme that tells us how to round. It says, look next door. If it's more than 4, then add 1 more. We'll draw a rectangle, which is the shape of a door. This is next to the digit we want to round. In this case, the next door digit is a 3. 3 is less than 4, so we'll leave the 8 alone. That means the 10th digit stays as an 8. Here's what the rounded number looks like. Please note that all the digits to the right of the rounded digit become 0. These are trailing zeros. They're on the far right of the decimal point, and there are no non-zero digits to their right. We don't have to write trailing zeros, and it's simpler if we do not write them. Here's a simpler way to write the final answer. We pronounce this as 4 8/10. The boat is about 4 8/10 of a mile from the shore. Thanks for your attention.